It's kind of helpful to think of a country's economy as its operating system. Seriously. It's the base code that dictates how everything runs, how resources get managed, what stuff gets made, and who ends up with it. So let's take a look under the hood at the different operating systems that are running the world. Because it turns out every single economic system, no matter how complicated it seems, is really just trying to answer this one huge question. Who gets to own the means of production? And by that, we mean the factories, the farms, the technology, all the big stuff that creates wealth. Should it be private individuals, all chasing their own dreams? Or should it be the government, acting on behalf of everyone? This one question, right here, is the ultimate fork in the road. So, to really understand the different answers to that big question, we've got to first be clear on what an economic system even is. This is the foundation for, well, everything else we're about to talk about. Right. So an economic system isn't just about money or the stock market. Nope. It's the whole framework, the social and political rules a country agrees to live by to keep things organized. You can think of it as a society's master plan for tackling one basic universal problem. There just isn't enough of everything to go around. The easiest way to wrap your head around this is to picture a spectrum. On one far end, you've got total private control, and on the complete opposite end, you have full government control. Now, the truth is, most countries don't actually live at these extremes. They find a spot somewhere in the middle. So let's start by exploring those two poles, and we'll begin with capitalism. Capitalism, the system that many of us are most familiar with, really exploded onto the scene during the Industrial Revolution. I mean, it was a massive shift that completely rewired society and how we think about work, money, and success. Okay, so in a capitalist system, the whole engine is fueled by private ownership. Individuals, not the government, own the factories, the land, the companies. People are pretty much free to start a business, make deals, and the main reason for doing all this? The pursuit of profit. And that dynamic, as you can imagine, creates a marketplace buzzing with competition. You see this in places like the US, the UK, Japan, and Germany.
The central idea here was famously summed up by Adam Smith with this concept of the invisible hand. His argument was that the market, left to its own devices, would sort everything out. Millions of people just doing what's best for them would, as if guided by an invisible hand, end up allocating resources in the most efficient way possible. No central planner needed to call the shots.
But, and this is a big but, it's a system of trade-offs. On one hand, that profit motive is an incredible driver for hard work and innovation. It leads to amazing technological progress and a ton of goods for consumers to choose from. But what's the flip side? Well, it can create huge gaps between the rich and poor, lead to social tensions, and of course, there are those infamous boom and bust economic cycles. All right, so now let's take a walk all the way to the other end of our spectrum. Let's see what happens when you start with a totally different set of answers and build a fundamentally different system. So, under a purely socialist system, the whole operating principle is flipped on its head. The means of production belong to everyone, to society, and are managed by the state. The goal is not individual profit, but the welfare of the group. All the big economic decisions, what gets made, how much, and who gets it, are handled by a central planning authority. And while no large country is 100% socialist today, this model has had a huge influence on nations around the world. And just like capitalism, socialism comes with its own list of pros and cons. Proponents will tell you it can lead to greater social justice and economic stability, and that it can direct resources where they're needed most. But critics will argue that it can kill the incentive to work hard, limit what consumers can choose, and put way too much power into the hands of the government. So when you strip away all the complex theories and the politics, the whole debate really boils down to the answers to these three things. Who owns the stuff? What makes people get out of bed in the morning? And is there competition? How a country answers these questions pretty much sets its entire economic course. Okay, so we've looked at the two theoretical extremes. But what about the real world, the messy reality? Where do most countries actually land on that spectrum? And that brings us to the mixed economy, which is by far the most common system in the world today. People often call it the golden path because it really tries to cherry-pick the best of both worlds. It lets a private sector innovate and grow, driven by profit, but it also has a public sector that provides essential services and looks out for social welfare. It's a pragmatic blend, a balancing act between individual freedom and the good of the community. So we've talked about the different operating systems, but there's another really important layer to all this. It's not just about the rules of the game, but also about the final score. Yeah, we're adding a whole second dimension here. It's one thing to know if an economy is capitalist or mixed, but it's another thing to know how, well, rich it is. We can also group countries based on their level of economic development, which is really just a measure of their wealth and the quality of life for their people.
So, to make this real, let's look at a hard number. The World Bank sets an official benchmark every year. For 2023, for instance, if a country's average income per person, that's the per capita income, was more than $13,845, it was officially classified as a high-income or developed nation.
And the difference between these two groups is just stark. Developed economies have high incomes, high standards of living, and their economies are built on industry and services. On the other side, developing economies are often struggling with low incomes, widespread poverty, and a heavy reliance on agriculture. It's a tale of two very different economic worlds. And honestly, nothing drives home what that difference means for actual human beings like this chart. Just look at the average daily calorie intake. It's such a simple metric, but it speaks volumes about the standard of living. The gap between what's typically on a plate in the US versus in Bangladesh is just enormous, and it's a direct reflection of these deep economic divides. So, all of this leaves us with one final, really important question. The classic models we've talked about, capitalism and socialism, were born in the industrial age. But now we're facing 21st century challenges, things like AI and automation, climate change, global pandemics. Are these old operating systems still up to the task? And what might the next golden path even look like?